Hello, and welcome to Be the Change, a special edition series within the Culture Shift with Gerard and Jovan, focused on criminal justice reform. Today, we're speaking with Jay Jordan, the new VP of Community Engagement at Reform Alliance. He's going to talk to us about the organization's work in the fight for criminal justice reform and its focus on probation and parole. Jay will take us inside the new executive leadership team and what they have planned for the foreseeable future, as well as how the organization's A-list board members aid in the fight for bipartisan support for criminal justice reform. So join me in welcoming Jay Jordan. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing very well. So we are speaking on the heels of Reform Alliance bringing in some new energy to the C-suite executive team as the organization enters its sixth year. Can you share a little bit about the new team members and what areas they're focused on in advancing the organization's mission?
Sure. Jessica Jackson, the longstanding chief advocacy officer at Reform, was promoted last year to chief executive officer. And she went out and got a dynamic team. She wanted a team that could help take Reform to the next level, Reform 3.0, because she's the third CEO in a line of great CEOs, Van Jones and Robert Rooks, and now Jessica Jackson. And so she needed a chief operating officer that was could merge the two things that usually butt up against each other, both streamlining processes and shifting org culture. And as you know, if you doing org processy work around the country, shifting culture and streamlining processes are, not mutually exclusive. And so he's been able to do that. Ed Herrera has been at the forefront of some of the most dynamic organizations around the country, and he came in and literally helped us slash budget, helped us streamline processes, uplift org culture. It's been amazing to see Ed work. And then next up was Jareen. Jareen Imam came from the Harris campaign. She was their digital manager, overseeing all their digital products, and they brought her in, 2 months before the election, and she did amazing work, as we've seen, right? Did an amazing work,
Yeah.
and before that, she was at Amazon, a young executive at Amazon. Before that, she was at CNN, covering stories all around the world, and she's been amazing. Her job is to ensure that we have the right message to the right people at the right time, and she's came in like a wrecking ball in a good way, all right, and really built her team out. And then last was the VP of Community Engagement, excuse me, and she got me out of retirement. I was literally retired, and she yanked me out of retirement. It started with a play date. She said, "Hey, come to the house, come bring the kids," and next thing I know, I had a MacBook in front of my face, looking at an org chart. So
That is such the finesse, okay? Because I'm a new mom myself. If someone invited me over for a play date and then it turns into a contract, I mean, it's a good one though. It's a good one, but that's a way to get you in.
yeah,
Pull
for
at the
sure.
heartstrings.
Yeah, exactly,
Um,
for sure.
so you touched a little bit about what you had been doing. You were nearing retirement.
Mhm.
Can you share your background in getting into criminal justice reform work and then how it led you to the Reform Alliance?
Yeah, so like I said, I was actually retired. I retired for about 16, 17 months. I was running one of the largest criminal justice reform organizations in the country, Alliance for Safety and Justice, where we organize victims of crime and people living with old records to pass policy that made the criminal justice system a lot more effective and efficient and save taxpayer dollars, and increase outcomes. And we did that for about 10 years. We were really successful. Was able to be a part of over 50 winning campaigns at my tenure. I was there for about 10 years, and was able to go from organizer to executive director to a VP and then to CEO, and it's been really great at Alliance for Safety and Justice. Prior to that, I was doing organizing in South Los Angeles around violence and the intersection of violence and housing, and employment, for Faith in Action, one of the largest faith-based organizing networks in the country, really in the world. Really, really big, amazing, amazing group of folks. And organizing black churches. I'm a PK. I'm a preacher's kid, so that was near and dear to my heart. And prior to that, I was in Stockton, California, where I'm from, born and raised, organizing teenagers and community around community projects, basic community projects like park cleanups, teaching kids to fish, cleaning graffiti, like really
Wow.
deep base building, and community projects. And prior to that, I was locked up.
Mm,
I did 7 years, 7 months for robbery at the age of 18, 19. So whenever all of my friends were going off to college, I was made a really, really stupid mistake, a childish mistake, and I really regret it to this day. Every day I think about, like, man, where would I be if I didn't make that mistake? But obviously, it turned out okay for me. But yeah, I served 7 years for that, and when I got out, it was tough. It was tough, and luckily, I had the support of my father and my mother and my family.
yeah.
But getting jobs, trying to secure, my way in life. I had a whole plan when I was going to get out. Well, I was going to be a barber because I used to cut hair in prison. I was going to be a barber, and I was going to sell life insurance because, unfortunately, in Stockton, a lot of black men were dying that I knew. So I said, hey, let me sell life insurance because, why not? And then sell real estate because Stockton was the ground zero for the foreclosure crisis. So I said, I'm going to do those three things. And, I got out when I was 26. And before I got home, I actually went to the barbershop. I went to Big Herc's barbershop, my longstanding barber, and I was in his chair and I was explaining all the things I wanted to do. And he said, "You can't do any of that, man. You got felonies. You can't get your cosmetology license. You can't get your insurance license. You can't get your real estate license.
Wow.
You have to get a job." And it was really, really hard for me to find a job. And so I threw myself into community work because I realized that I
Yeah.
was the rule and not the exception. And just because I was a rule didn't mean that I couldn't change the rules. And so I learned advocacy, I learned campaigns, I learned the rules and regulations of the government, and I got to work. And I was able to do some really good stuff. And along the way, I was introduced to Robert Rooks, who was one of my longtime friends and mentors, and he brought me into the work doing statewide policy. And he went on to run Reform. And when he left Reform, that's when I got the call, and Jessica said, "Hey, Robert's gone. What about you?" And so that's
That's
how I got
amazing.
introduced to Reform.
That's such an amazing story. Even as you were telling it, I was seeing it as a documentary. That
Mm,
you really have such a great story, and I was wondering where that passion came from with the community work because you've really been on the front lines. It sounds
hmm
from
Yeah.
your background and your experience leading up to Reform Alliance, and it seems like as much I yes I understand you even regretting that decision that led you into the system, but would you say that that experience and even that time you served created the shift to lead you to where you are in your career?
I would say I don't um I did harm. I harmed my community, I harmed a person, I harmed my family. I didn't get to see my nieces and nephews grow up, and I will never forgive myself for that. And there we live in a society now where people who are formerly incarcerated, we lead with, hey, I went to prison and now I deserve a second chance. But I just lead with, you know, give me some empathy, and also give me grace because I live with the harm I did every day. Even though no one really got hurt, I just feel like that putting that negativity out in my community was a wrong thing. And so I did a long time for that. And my 7 years wasn't the 7 years you see on TV where people were successful. I really, did my 7 years. And I did my 7 years on level fours. I did 2 years in solitary confinement, and so my time wasn't easy. And I don't look for sympathy in terms of what happened to me. I did the crime, so I did my time. And within that space, I was able to really be introspective. And you know, being black in America, you're always searching for identity, especially when you get into certain spaces that are foreign. You're like, well, how black can I be? Or I gotta put on my professional belt, or in the case of me, I gotta be tough, right? And somebody asked me when I first got to the solitary confinement, it's what really changed my perspective on who I was. My neighbor asked me who I was, and I told him, what they called me in prison, right? And that he told me that's who I was, not that's what I was, not who I was.
Mm,
And it took me a while to kind of understand what he was saying, but it really resonated with me that all the things that I was considering myself to be, this this tough dude, this a black man, all these different things were really labels, and who was I truly inside. And that's when I went on my journey, and I'm still on the journey to be the best I can be. If you ask me who I am now, I say I'm the dad to Jay Marcello and Damasio Marie, the husband to Carmen Perez Jordan, the son to Ernest Charles Jordan and Llewellyn Patricia Jordan. I'm a good brother. I'm a advocate. I'm an organizer, right? And I'm a human, right? And humans make mistakes, and we continuously evolve, and that's essentially who I am. Just striving to be a good human every day.
Most definitely. And from that experience, you're able to even put a level of understanding into the work that you guys are doing at Reform Alliance. And a lot of the work centers on probation and parole.
Hmm.
And even given your experience, why is it so important to support those who have been formerly incarcerated in that part of the system?
Yeah. So if you look at this as kind of like a timeline, right? Where you have people going in. So folks break the law, you get arrested. There's certain things that we as a society should be doing for those individuals going inside, right? And the end goal should be that they never come back and they are successful when they get out, right? So there should be something there that we're doing while they're preparing themselves to go into incarceration and, quite frankly, be punished. While they're incarcerated, what are we doing to ensure that they're getting ready to get out, right? And then when they do get out, there's a moment when they're on supervision, whether it's probation, whether it's parole, or if you get locked up in the feds, it's federal supervised release. What happens in that moment is truly, truly, truly important to the success of that individual and their family and the community they go back to for the rest of their life. Right? Currently in America, there's about 70 to 100 million people with some sort of criminal record that ranges from misdemeanors to felonies. 9 out of 10 of those people have already served their time. They've been out an average of 6 years, and they're over the age of 35. So most people with a criminal record in America are done, right? The small percentage that are on probation and parole, 3.8 million people. Now, in the bucket of criminal records, that's a small drop, but it's a very important drop. Think about it. They are returning home from prison. They're returning home from jail. They just had this massive interruption in their life, and they are going back into society, right? The problem here is that most supervision spaces and policies and procedures and offices have conditions, right? And some of these conditions prevent someone from being fully integrated into their family, fully integrated into their economy, and fully integrated into their community. And it's not to keep us safe, but to ensure that they are following the rules that are probably set in place decades earlier, right? That don't even apply to today's society. Case in point, in some states, if you're on supervision, you can't travel outside your county to get a job. Now, I live in New Jersey. Say I get my, commercial driver's license, right? I'm not going to be able to find a job right here in New Jersey like I'm going to be able to find a job if I take the ferry every day over to New York and drive a box truck, right? So, not allowing people, especially in rural parts of America, to go outside their county lines and to find a good job and to come back is harmful. Or say they're telling you have to show up, to your probation or parole officers for a check in at 12 p.m. What job is going to continuously let you leave at 12 p.m.? Right? Some have curfews. A lot of people who get out don't have the skills to get high skilled labor jobs. So they end up going to warehouses, construction, whatever. Some of these jobs cause people to work the third shift or the swing shift. So instead of working a 9 to 5 like the rest of us, they may have to work from 6 to 2 or from 10 to 6. If you have a curfew, which a lot of people on supervision do, you can't work those jobs. And the list goes on and on and on, and not just for the economy, but for their families as well. Some people with felonies who are on supervision can't live with people in public housing. Well, we know that a lot of places that have a lot of police, are you know, spots that have public housing, and people get incarcerated and they get out. They can't go live with their granny. They can't go live with their significant other, because their significant other has public housing assistance. They can't go there, right? So where are they going to go? A lot of people go to shelters. A lot of people go to places like Edgecombe in Harlem, that is a reentry facility that is essentially, a place where folks who don't have, housing have to go, right, until they can secure housing. So there are all these conditions that are a part of probation and parole in a lot of states that don't make any sense. There's two more points to this, which is why it's important to focus on probation and parole. Some states never don't have parole caps or probation caps. You can be on probation for life. So you have these conditions for the rest of your life. Even though you served your time, you have these conditions for the rest of your life, right? And there's something called technical violations, where you can be sent back to prison even if you don't commit a crime. Something like showing up 5 minutes late for a check-in with your probation officer or your parole officer. If you live in, a part of the city, right, and you have to take a bus, because a lot of folks don't have transportation, all the way to the office, and the bus is stopped, right, and gets caught up, because that happens in traffic, and you're 5 minutes late, you can be sent back to prison. So there are all these conditions that happen, right, and are put on people who are already at a disadvantage because they went to jail. And listen, this is not to say they don't deserve, the punishment that they went through while incarcerated, but now they are out. And it is up to us, all of us, right, tax-paying citizens, to say we need a system that is effective, that is not broken, that is not nonsensical, that does not put people into a probation and parole poverty trap that sends them right back to prison, and quite frankly, costs me and you and everyone watching this a lot of money as taxpayers, because it costs more money to incarcerate somebody and house them than it does to let them out and be successful, so they can take care of themselves and their family. So this 3.8 million is crucial and important population in the big scheme of things, because these are the ones that are still under carceral control, right? You have the folks who are in prison and jail, and you have the folks who are on probation and parole. They're under carceral control. So we have an opportunity, because
Yes.
they are being supervised, to develop a holistic system that works for everybody.
Yeah. Thank you for that breakdown. Very leveled and thoroughly explained. And yeah, because it is our taxpayer and dollars going towards this. So it makes sense to make it the most efficient that it can be. Since the start of the Reform Alliance, the organization has helped to get 18 bipartisan bills passed in 11 states that have helped over 850,000 people exit the system. What are you seeing on a bipartisan level when it comes to prison and criminal justice reform?
Yeah, I think it's just what I said, right? Like, this
Mhm.
is, you know, if you look at people on the left and talk to people on the left, they're more in tune with equity and justice and morality, right? More ideological, right? People on the right are like, hey, government efficient, more, give us the ones and twos, right? Those two things sometimes clash and sometimes go hand in hand. When you have an archaic system like I like to say we don't have a criminal justice system. We have a crime response system, because it doesn't administer criminal justice per se. It responds to crime, and then everything that happens after that is what happens after that. And a lot of these systems are extremely archaic and old. And people who
Mhm.
work within these systems will tell you we can do a lot better, right? So it's not a thing where the system is bucking up against change. They welcome change and say, hey, make our job a lot easier. And so
Yeah.
we see bipartisan consensus when we look at redoing and rehashing and developing a better supervision system around the country, both state-based and federal, because it makes the probation and parole officers jobs a lot harder
Mhm.
when they aren't able to have the tools they need to support an individual. Listen, if you're a probation officer, parole officer out there, and you're having to go out and check on your parolee or your probationer, 5 times because the law says so, it's a
Yeah.
waste of your time, right? And so, like, there is like this government waste, this red tape, this bureaucratic nonsense that is rampant in a lot of the places in the criminal justice system, and in particular probation and parole, you see Democrats and Republicans and the people within the system saying, let's change this. I
Yep.
mean, if you look at the Association of Probation, the American Association of Probation and Parole Officers, like they agree, right? We have to change some of these policies so the good women that work within these bureaucratic systems can operate more smoothly and more efficiently. And so there is a lot of bipartisan support in, I won't call it dismantling,
Yeah.
but a redoing and reimagining what these systems could look like. I know
Mhm.
folks are, one of the things in the news is Doge, right? They're breaking a lot of stuff in the federal government and they're going to be rebuilding things that make a lot of sense. I mean, it is our hope that one of the things that they will look at is parts of the criminal justice system that don't make any sense whatsoever and is causing
Mhm.
tax and is costing taxpayers dollars. I was talking to a gentleman the other day and he's asking me, he says, "Hey, Jay, I'm trying to get a job. Like where can I find a job?" And we're going down the list of jobs. He lives in California. He's going down the list of jobs, and there's so many jobs in California. But he's like, "Hey, man, I'm on parole, and I can't do the things you're asking me, you're telling me to do, right?" And I'm like, "Well, what do you want to do? What do you want to do?" He says, "Well, I want to get my my CDLs. What I talked about earlier. I want to get my CDLs." And he's like, but the problem is I have a DUI, and so I can't do that. What can I do? And he was so discouraged because of all the restrictions and the thing that he can't do because he had a DUI. He wants to do, he can't do because he have a DUI, and all the other options, aren't for him. Now he wasn't as blessed as I was to have family, so he's homeless. Like he doesn't have an address, and the reason he was calling me was he wanted me to call his parole officer so he wouldn't get violated for not having a house. And so, like, it's these things just don't make sense. It's like, hey, look, this guy got a DUI. He can't get a CDL. He can't drive trucks. But all these other restrictions in terms of curfews aren't allowing him to get the jobs that are available to him. Now he's homeless because he can't pay rent, and you're going to throw him back in jail for being broke, being in poverty. So these things that both Democrats and Republicans are like, this doesn't make any sense. This
Right.
costs us a bunch of money. We
Exactly.
can do better, and we will do better.
That's what I mean. That gives at least some type of hope in this, daunting situation that we're in. It's been like this for decades. But of like you like I mentioned, the 850,000 people that you've helped exit the
Mhm.
system, are there any success stories that have come that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, right in our office, right? Reform is about 34% impacted by probation and parole. If you look at some of our folks who work with us, like Rondo, he's a young kid from New York, and he got out. Well, he was inside of jail, and he met Jessica Jackson. He met Lala Anthony, and they took a liking to him. He was very spunky. If you ever meet Rondo, he you you fall in love instantly. He's a good kid, but never really had a chance. Right? It was the cards were always stacked against him, and he got out. We gave him a job, and he's thriving. He's the one that runs our Gen Z Day of Action, our Future Shapers Network, and he does amazing job. He just had over 20 schools participate in our Gen Z Day of Action. It was amazing, and Rondo's thriving. Another one is Anthony, who runs our Edgecombe project in Edgecombe reentry facility in Harlem. He was another one that, when he met Jessica inside of Edgecombe, and he was like, I want you give me a job when I get out, and we gave him a shot. And Anthony's thriving. He just started Restaurant Ready with our partners at Edgecombe and the Odyssey House, where they train people in how to work in restaurants and give them the certifications they need to actually get the jobs in restaurants, and then connect them to jobs in restaurants in New York City. He just graduated his second cohort at Edgecombe. It's been amazing to see him work, and he's such a driven individual. But again, when I talked to him, he's like, "Yo, no one ever gave us a shot," and so we end up getting into this life of crime, and but reform is giving us a shot. And there are so many stories like that. I mean, we have them in our office. I mean, we get letters every day. A part of what I do is answer letters, right? I I don't leave that work to nobody else. They bring the letters to me, and I open them up, and I try to respond to every single one. And it's essentially when you are able And this is what I want folks to understand too. Like, this is not something that's, far off. You know, 1 in 2 people in America know someone that's been touched by this system, right? Like, everyone who has ever been in the system, right, has to go through probation and parole. So, like, this is the one place they all go through. And so when we are able to turn this small part of their life into a funnel for success, right? And put in controls that are cost effective, that make probation and parole officers' jobs a lot easier, that save us a lot of money on the front end and the back end, and make communities safer. They are successful. When we say, hey, we're not going to restrict you from jobs, we're not going to restrict you from being reunited with your family. We're not going to restrict you from getting an occupational license. We're not going to restrict you from things that allow you to contribute to mainstream society. We're not going to restrict your social activity, because when we know what we do know is increased social activity breeds increased economic activity. And the more economic activity, the more success stories we have. And they climb the economic ladder and they become self sufficient. And then they buy homes and buy a second home. And they start talking about, I want to, start watching Earn Your Leisure, start going to Invest Fest, right? They start getting involved. And this is what we want, right? We don't want to kill the American dream. We want to help bring it back and say, yes, you did harm, and yes, you will be punished for that. That's the law, right? I won't get into the severity of punishment and all of that, because that's not what reform does. But once they finish that process, we should all be saying we want to see this person succeed. One of the main reasons, because working with survivors of crime, they will tell you, you know, we don't want this person to do what they did to me to anybody else, right? And we want them to be successful, because we don't want them going and committing crimes. That should be the main goal of the system. It shouldn't be to put a person into a position where they might be compelled to, because they are restricted. We don't want to create a system to where we're breeding our homeless population into, like, and making those numbers go wider and wider and wider. If you look at, like, one of the number one causes of homelessness in America is the interruption of incarceration, and you add addiction to that, and mental health, you are almost automatically pushing people into a place to where they're going to end up with a stint on the streets. And so, our goal should be success and not failure.
Most definitely. Most definitely. I mean, everything you're saying, it resonates with me. I have three brothers. All three of them have ended up in the system, and one of them is still in the probation parole system. And he's a repeat offender with the same offense, and it is stemming from mental health. What I've always wondered, and they're in there and they just have all this idle time, and I'm just like, why don't you guys have like counseling? Why isn't there someone that you can talk to? Why aren't you doing like mindfulness activities? Like, you just have all this idle time, and they do whether the only time they really get is to like do the job that they're given, um and maybe some rec time, little phone time, and then that's it. And it's like, what are they actually doing, kind of even to what you're saying of like, that's going to prepare them for returning to society. And then even now, as he's out, still with the same mental health issues, there's he has to see his probation officer on a consistent basis, but there's not that same support when it comes to helping him um, maintain his mental health, which is a big key factor that
Mhm.
leads him back into making wrong decisions. So it
Mhm.
is like this like circle, and it's like, well, if we're spending money on putting people in jail, if you're taking my tax dollars and putting it towards all these prisons that are in this country, why aren't they actually being rehabilitated while they're in there? If you're going to
Yep.
take my money anyway to go towards that, so I totally get everything you're saying. And when it comes with Reform Alliance, there's a lot of star power behind it. It's
Mhm.
undeniable. A diverse group, very diverse group of A-list figures across entertainment, sports, business came together to make it happen, which was so inspiring to me when I saw it, and just I was so enthralled to see when it launched, and before the whole trend of what happened in 2020. So now with the tie-in that Reform Alliance has to these A-listers, are you finding that it helps you when you are looking for this bipartisan support in making change towards probation and parole?
Yeah, so reform by default is nonpartisan, right? So we're bipartisan. We have Republican champions, we have Democratic champions. We more lean, kind of like in the middle most times. But we work with a lot of Republicans. What we find is Republicans love this issue because it's government efficiency,
That's right.
right? It's public safety, right? And so our board has been extremely generous in terms of their time. And there's been times where they can call a governor, amazing kind of wisdom, right, in how to navigate certain spaces. And so we are truly, truly, truly honored and blessed to have the board that we have and the proximity to the people that we are proximate to. One thing I will say is, people think reform has all this money. It's like we fundraise, right? We're definitely a nonprofit. So, and we do re-grant sometimes, but it's not like we have an unlimited budget. We do fundraise and we are a nonprofit, right? It's the nonprofit arm, so we're an advocacy organization. But it does help when you know um, you need a call, and Meek Mill picks up the phone and hops on a call, right? He's so passionate about, because it's all started with him, and he's just such a good soul, and he understands the issue. Really understands the issue. Very intelligent brother, and he gets in there when he needs to, and he's helped us pass things. And so this is not a board that just sits back and say, "Oh, y'all go do the work." They're involved, and they've been helped to pass these bills, and it's been inspiring to see. I mean, I'm new here, just in my short time, I've seen him hop on a call
Mhm.
and stay on the call for a whole hour explaining why this is important. So they
Wow.
deeply, deeply, deeply care about the issue, and it's been kind of from afar. You're like, oh, do they really care about it? No, they
Right.
care, and they roll their sleeves up and they get it done.
Wow. That's I love to see it. I love to see it. It's really good to hear. And so you do put a focus on probation and parole, but are there any other areas as it relates to the system, the criminal justice system, that Reform Alliance works to advocate for?
Yeah, so I mean, that's our primary focus.
Hmm.
But when you do that, you realize that you have to focus on jobs, right? So we've always done job fairs. That's kind of our sweet spot. And we're looking at the economic outcomes for people on supervision. And there's not a lot of data out there. The data points that are out there is that if you're on supervision, particularly parole, you're 3 times more likely to be unemployed. And in fact, 3 out of 4 people on supervision make less than $25,000 a year, right? And 40% of those folks make less than $10,000 a year. So we're literally talking about poverty, right? And we think that there is an opportunity there to have an influence on that and change that, right? Again, when I talked about at the top of this pod is, if there's anything in the state code or in the administrative policies of probation offices and parole offices around the country that restrict employment, those need to categorically go away,
Right.
right? We should not be stopping people from working. Now, if there's like a very clear nexus to the crime and the
Right.
severity of the crime, like if somebody robbed a bank, the guy probably shouldn't be working as this bank teller, right? But
Right. Right. Right.
but those are obvious. For
Exactly.
the vast majority of people should not have any work restrictions, and
Mm.
that's one of the things that we really are going to be focused on. We have focused on, but we're going to double down on, is ensuring that everybody who gets on probation and parole has absolutely no restrictions to work, no restrictions to employment, except where like absolutely necessary,
Exactly.
right? And we feel like when we do that, when we focus on that, not only will the individual have better outcomes, but their family will have better outcomes. Mind you, most people go back to their family,
Yeah.
and having someone go back to their family with um, no job is already tough. It's tough, right? I went back to my mom and daddy's house. and it was right after the '08 crash. When people were recovering, and my sisters, two of my sisters, were staying there with their husbands and their families, and my family was the one that hoarded all in one house when it happened because my family lost their homes, and they all
Mhm.
put their money in together and bought a really big house, and we all stayed in that house. And when I got home, that's where I went, and I was a burden. I knew, and I felt it every day, like I can't get a job, and I'm like, what we eating tonight? And I'm a man, I was a grown man, and so I want to take care of myself, and like not allowing someone to do that is not only just un-American, it's kind of immoral, and it's
Mhm.
demoralizing to the individual. It's like, man,
Right.
they can't take care of themselves, and so it's important. It's really, really, really important. So we want to make sure that probation and pro is not contributing to
Definitely.
failure, right? And so, and so jobs is a big thing. And when you do that, it's also um, important that families are not just struggling with a person that you know can't get a job, but as you alluded to, some people are coming home with mental illness. There's a our jails and prisons have become de facto mental health hospitals, and it's hard for families around the country who don't want to see their loved one go on the streets, but sometimes it's hard to live in a house with them, and there's no tools for that. And so we want to ensure that we're putting incentives in place, so if a person does go to mental health support groups, right, or get mental health treatment, they get time off their probation or parole sentence, right? These things are important not only for the individual but for the family, and it
Yes.
then becomes important for the community, because if we don't do that, then we're going to keep seeing rises in homelessness, and the intersection of incarceration, mental health, and substance abuse is going to get worse and worse in this country. And we've seen it all across this country, from California to New York, from Texas all the way to Montana. Our streets are looking like zombie lands,
Right.
and we can fix that. We have fixed that. There are models, right? And again, reform only does our little part in terms of probation and parole policy. But all of this is part and parcel of this larger system. And if we could focus on removing the barriers to work and removing the barriers to success and building pathways to well-being while on supervision, and also create incentives for when you are on supervision to go to work training, to go to mental health support groups, to go to treatment, to do the things that it takes for you to become whole and to become successful in mainstream society, and that then incentivizes time off of your probation and parole sentence, then we're doing our part to address some of these nuanced issues that families face and communities face all around the country.
It's impactful work. It's meaningful work. It's needed. Is there anything that Reform Alliance has planned for the rest of 2025 and the foreseeable future?
Yeah, so United Justice Coalition is having their UJC summit May 30th, and we'll be in attendance. We're a featured organization. We have speaker series every single month. The fourth Wednesday of every month. So if you want to get involved with our speaker series, you can go to reformalliance.com, and that's on our website. It's in our office in New York City. We're right in the middle of Times Square, so you can come and listen to folks speak. And if you can't make it in person, you can hop on Zoom with us, and it's going to be amazing. We're revamping the speaker series. It is First one will be with Professor Elizabeth Hinton from Yale, talking about the history of probation and parole and incarceration. So it's going to be amazing time. We also have a lot of summer events in all of our states. So if you're in Florida, if you're in Virginia, if you're in Pennsylvania, if you're in New York or New Jersey, if you're in Iowa, we're in Iowa too. We're in Indiana. If you're in California, or if you're in Illinois, we have organizers there. We'll be doing summer events throughout the summer, events throughout the fall. And lastly, we have our Reform Advocacy Institute, RAI. This is a training boot camp. It's a 6 week boot camp for people who've been on probation or parole, or immediate family members that want to learn about civics, about how government works, about how advocacy works, organizing, and communications. When people go through our RAI program, they leave out knowing what to do, and then they become our super reformers. We support them throughout their advocacy journeys. Again, that will be on our website, reformalliance.com. We accept 25 people. This cohort, we're partnering with Yale, and we have a partnership with Harvard. And so when you graduate, you'll be able to get a certificate from Yale. And then that we have a graduation ceremony at Yale and Harvard. So really excited about that. So if you know anybody who's been on supervision and want to learn about advocacy, I will personally be teaching those things. And if you want to become a reformer, and join our member list, and we have monthly calls, join our Discord. We're going to be ramping up our member engagement. And I'm really excited about that because people are always like, how can I get involved with reform? Well, you can become a reformer. Again, go to our website, reformalliance.com. And there will be, once you sign up, you'll go through a welcome series. You'll get on our Discord. You'll be talking to me every month. We might have special guests. You'll be getting updates on our federal bill and our federal work, our statewide work. And so we're really going to ramp up because now is the time. And we see opportunity both in each state that we're in and also a massive opportunity for our Safer Supervision Act, which is our federal bill. We're working with the Senate, the House, and the White House to get this done this year.
Oh my gosh. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you, Jay. You guys are doing amazing work over there. It sounds like they brought the right people on to join the team. And I'm really excited to see what you have coming up for the remainder of the year, the foreseeable future, and just even helping in this much needed fight to clean up decades of just muck. It's muck.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me.